tomb of King Ramesses III, the last great Ramesses among the family of Ramesses, who are 11 in number. He is famous for the great battle that he led in the sea against the people of the sea who were attacking Egypt, and his famous temple in the West Bank, which is called Habu Temple. His tomb here in the Valley of the Kings is not less interesting compared to all his other monuments in Egypt. So when you see the scenes on the walls of the tomb of King Ramesses III in the West Bank, in the Valley of the Kings in Luxor, you will be totally amazed, not only by them, but also by the coloring, who seems to be so fresh and new, as if they were painted yesterday. So make sure when you come to visit the Valley of the Kings, do not miss a visit to King Ramesses III tomb. King Ramesses III entered the pages of history for being the last mighty king in ancient Egypt during the New Kingdom. For in his time, Egypt had witnessed important military victories as well as remarkable constructional and artistic renaissance that happened between 1184 and 1153 BC. The king's birth name is Ramessoheka Iyun, which means the one born by Ra, ruler of Iyun, which is Thebes. His coronation name is Wesermite Ra Meri Amun, which means strong is the justice of Ra, the one beloved by Amun. By the end of the 19th dynasty, many foreigners and mercenaries penetrated and spread in the country, setting their eyes on occupying Egypt. Thus, by the beginning of the 20th dynasty, Ramesses III found himself facing the challenge, and courageously he stood for it in the 5th year of his reign and fought the Libyans and their allies of the Indo-Europeans and knocked them down in the west of the Delta. The news of this battle was recorded on the walls of his temple in Habu. Amongst the most important battles which the Egyptian army fought in the reign of King Ramesses III is the one he fought in the 8th year of his reign against the Sea people. They were the Sicilians, the Belest, who are the origins of the Palestinians, and the Chardans of Sardinia, and Mashawash, and others. These people invaded Khita of the Hittites and occupied some of the Mediterranean islands and some of the cities by the Forat River, then headed to Egypt with a navy and an on-land army, and reached the mouth of the Nile. The Egyptian army, led by King Ramesses III, had successfully swept away the enemy's army on land and at sea. This water battle, which the fleet of Egypt had fought, was the first of its kind in the history of Egypt. That's why the king described it in details on the walls of his temple in Habu, in the west bank of Luxor. By that, Ramesses III saved Egypt from a great danger that has almost ruined it by terminating the sea people in the east and the west. Moreover, he demonstrated Egypt's power in Syria and Palestine, and even reached the Forat River, which his ancestors have reached before. By that, he revived Egypt's reverence in the provinces ruled by the Egyptian Empire. Thebes was the capital of Egypt during the New Kingdom. Its kings chose the mountainous area on the west bank of Luxor to be the perfect place for digging their tombs, an area called today the Valley of the Kings. After trying tombs in the shape of pyramids, then rock-cut tombs in the previous eras, it became obvious that these methods haven't prevented the thieves from robbing the pharaoh's tombs. So the kings of the 18th dynasty and their successors turned to cut their tombs in the mountain's rocks in secrecy, in a place where no man goes and no plant grows. Being robbed as well, the pharaohs of the 20th dynasty didn't conceal the entrances of their tombs. To the contrary, they took care of them and had them relieved and colored, but conducted a good security system by assigning guards and a chief responsible for the safety of the West Bank and its precious contents. King Ramses III was one of the pharaohs of this era. He took advantage of the abandoned tomb of his father Setnacht, which was left for intersecting with the aerial tomb of Amun-Meses, and changed its interior direction towards the depths of the mountain to continue with his tomb's plan. The entrance of the tomb has 2 steps on 2 sides, and a slope in the middle over which the great sarcophagus of the king can slide down. On both sides of the entrance is a traditional scene of the king revering god Ra-Hur-Akhti, while goddess Maat spreads her wings, assuring justice to be done in the netherworld. The tri-symbols of the sun are there. The scarab or kheper is the sun in the early hours of the morning. The circle is the sun at noon in its prime period, and in the end of the day, god Atum represents it. On both sides open 10 small chambers that used to contain the funerary objects. The scenes inside each room tells about its contents, like the jars filled with wine and oils and seeds, and the rugs and even the funerary boats, spreading their sails and folding them. Up in the walls, there are 2 niches which are there to contain the boxes that preserve the Oshakti statues which served the king in the afterlife. Their number was over 365. The corridor ends with the tomb of Amun-Meses, the cause of which Setnacht abandoned the tomb. The corridor ends with the tomb of Amun-Meses, the cause of which Setnacht abandoned the tomb. But Ramses III found an interesting solution, which is deviating from the main axis and turning right in a right angle to the tomb's axis, then returning to it by going left, adding by that a new aisle, and allowing the work to continue parallel to his original plan. In the pre-chamber, the scenes represent Isis and Anubis, then Nephthys and Anubis, then the king stands in front of Atum and Ptah, then presents offerings to Ptah Soker Osiris, who is protected by Isis' wings. The main aisle of King Ramses III tomb is distinguished with its afterlife scenes. They are some chapters of the Book of the Netherworld, or the Emiduat. This book is divided into 12 chapters, or 12 hours. Each hour is divided into 3 sections, or 3 lines. Here, there is 1 hour on the right side of the wall and another hour to the left. They are hours number 4 and 5. In the 4th hour, the sun boat over which the deceased ride with his crew sails in the river of the netherworld. The boat in this hour changed from its normal shape to be suitable to the nature of the underground world. Here, it sails over Godsucker's sand, so it has changed into a snake so that it can glide easily. The serpent helps too in illuminating the darkness of this area. The 5th hour is the same. In the 1st and 3rd rows, there are scenes and texts that describe the scene related to the boat, with shedding light on the name of the crew of gods on the boat and the creatures which will encounter the deceased in this hour. Each hour has a name and a place, and the dead has to know all these names to overcome the creatures which he'll encounter in this hour. There are doors opened in front of the boat, and good serpents guiding and protecting it with their magic from the vicious serpent waiting at the end of the tunnel. He is the evil Apophis. In the same time, the good serpent, Mehen, circles the sun god or the deceased to protect him. The text scenes of the Imidwat, in addition to the scenes of the king in relationship with gods and goddesses, were the only scenes recorded on the walls of the burial chambers of kings, starting from Thutmose I until Amun-Hotep III. Akhenaten's revolution ended these texts, except for a wall in King Tutankhamun's tomb. As for the texts and scenes of the Imidwat, they were confined to the tombs of kings and queens only, just like the pyramids texts. But Queen Hatshepsut allowed her vizier Wazir Amun to record the complete version of the Book of the Netherworld on the walls of his tomb in Sheikh Abdul Korna. Behind the main aisle there is a shaft, then a large room with 4 pillars, in the middle of which is a slope going down to the rest of the tomb. On the left side of the room are scenes from the Book of the Gates. This book is composed of a description of the sun's journey during the 12 night hours through 12 gates. Each of them is protected by a huge evil snake. The deceased had to know the name of the hour and the name of the gate in order to pass through it and continue his journey. The scenes of that book are almost similar to the ones of the Book of the Netherworld, but the thing that distinguishes it is the scene of Osiris' Hall and the final scene of that book, which represents God Nun lifting up high the sun boat out of the eternal water. The other thing is that the number of gods escorting the sun on its boat became 2 instead of 9, and the names became less and thus easier for the beholder to memorize. The rest of the chambers comprise scenes of the king in relationships with gods and goddesses, especially God Osiris, the god of the dead, and the Lord of Judgment in his court. They all prepare him for the most important part of his journey, which ends in the last chamber or the burial chamber. There is no access to it for the visitor, but it's a large one with 8 pillars and 4 small rooms in its corners. Unfortunately, The sarcophagus is in the Louvre Museum in Paris, and its granite cover in Fitzwilliam Museum in Cambridge. Ramses III was buried here, but his mummy was transported by the priests to a safer place when robberies prevailed. It was found amongst the 40 mummies hidden in El Deir el-Bahari in 1881, lying in a simple wooden coffin barren from reliefs except the name of the king. The children of King Ramses III are buried in the Valley of the Queens, most probably to be close to their mothers. There are two tombs. One belongs to Prince Amun Horheb Shah F and the other belonging to Prince Kha Emwas. It appears that they both died too young, and they still have the side hairlock, and their tombs are brightened up with vivid colors. They had the traditional titles of princes, the most important of which is the bearer of the fan beside the king. The princes carry long ostrich wreaths, and it's noticed that it's their father who presents them to gods and goddesses, and that he himself performs all the rituals instead of them, because of their young age. Ramses III had constructed the biggest memorial temple in the New Kingdom. It's Habu Temple, that's considered Karnak of the West compared to Karnak Temple of the East. Besides its being an example of the fine Egyptian architect and art, it's a live record of the historical events that happened during the reign of this man and the history of Egypt during his time. The temple still keeps the ruins of a palace adjacent to it, built for the rest of the king when he comes to visit the temple. In spite of the fact that, during his final years, foreigners sneaked into his palace and conspired against him, and there was interior turbulence in the country's affairs, yet Ramses III was one of Egypt's best warriors and greatest builders, and the last pharaoh who kept Egypt's reverence all around the empire, and thus deserved his mighty position amongst the pharaohs of Egypt.